The blizzard had been raging for hours, turning the world outside into an endless white void. I had been alone in my cabin for 3 days now, the power flickering in and out, the cold creeping through every crack in the wooden walls. The storm wasn't supposed to be this bad, but forecasts meant nothing when nature decided to turn violent. I kept the fire going, the only real source of warmth I had left. My phone had died yesterday, and without power, there was no way to charge it. I was completely cut off. It was late when I first noticed the footprints. They led up to my front door, pressed deep into the snow, perfectly shaped, as if someone had just walked up moments ago. But there were no footprints leading away. My stomach clenched. The wind howled and snow swirled in thick, chaotic spirals, but the prints remained sharp, undisturbed. I stepped closer to the window, peering out, my breath fogging the glass. No one was there. I strained to see beyond the dim glow of my porch light, but the storm was too thick. The knock came suddenly, soft but deliberate. My heart jumped into my throat. It wasn't the wind, it wasn't a branch. It was a knock. 3 slow, rhythmic taps against the wood. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Another knock followed, and another. My pulse pounded in my ears. The idea of someone standing out there in this storm should have made me open the door, should have made me rush to help. But every instinct screamed at me to stay still. I waited. The knocking stopped. I exhaled, trying to calm my nerves, telling myself it was just paranoia. Maybe the wind had blown something against the cabin. Maybe I imagined it. I backed away from the door. The fire crackled behind me, throwing long, flickering shadows across the walls. Then came the creak, the floorboards on my porch, right outside the door. Someone or something was shifting its weight. I grabbed the poker from the fireplace, gripping it tight. My breathing was uneven, my fingers cold with sweat. The wind howled again, rattling the windows. Then silence. Nothing. The storm roared outside, but the knocking, the creaking, it had stopped completely. I forced myself to move, inching toward the door. I pressed my ear against the wood. Nothing. I exhaled. Maybe it was the doorknob turned, not violently, not as if someone was trying to break in, just turning, slowly, deliberately. I stumbled back, knocking into the coffee table. My pulse was a hammer in my chest. The knob twisted, clicked. The door shuddered as if pressure was being applied from the other side. I didn't wait. I lunged forward and slammed the deadbolt into place. The moment I did, everything stopped. No wind, no creaking, just a suffocating, unnatural silence. I stood there for what felt like forever, the fire flickering at my back. Then I did something I regret. I lowered myself to my knees, just enough to peek under the door. There was nothing. No feet, no shadow, just the undisturbed snow outside. The storm still swirling beyond the porch light. I stood up, my breath shaky. Maybe I was losing my mind. Isolation. I moved away from the door, back toward the fireplace, trying to tell myself it was just my imagination. The wind, exhaustion. I barely slept that night, but nothing else happened. The storm eventually began to die down. Morning came, gray and lifeless. I hesitated before opening the door, gripping the poker tight, ready for anything. I swung it open. The footprints were still there, leading up to my door. Still no footprints leading away. I scanned the area, my heart hammering. Nothing. I took a step outside, the cold biting through my clothes. That's when I saw them. Another set of footprints, but these weren't leading toward the cabin. They started at my bedroom window, and they led back to the door. The storm had been relentless for days, a suffocating whiteout that erased the world beyond my small roadside motel. I was the only staff on duty, left alone to watch the front desk while the owner was away for the week. We rarely got guests in winter, and with the storm shutting down the highways, I didn't expect anyone to show up. But at around midnight, the bell above the front door chimed. I nearly jumped out of my chair. I hadn't heard a car pull up. No headlights had cut through the blizzard outside. But there he was, a tall man bundled in a heavy coat, snow clinging to the fabric. His hood was up, casting deep shadows over his face. I forced a smile. Rough night, huh? The man didn't respond. He just stood there, motionless, the cold air swirling in behind him. My unease grew. His coat was thick, but he didn't seem to be shivering. His breath didn't fog in the air like mine did. You, need a room? I asked, my fingers tightening around the motel register. A long pause. Then, slowly, he nodded. I swallowed and reached for a key. Cash or card? Another pause. Then, in a voice so low I barely heard it, he said, Cash. I handed him the key to room 6, watching as he turned without another word, and walked stiffly down the dimly lit hall. His boots didn't even seem to make a sound against the old carpet. I exhaled, shaking off the unease. I was probably just on edge because of the storm. I checked the logbook out of habit. No guests had checked in for a week. I flipped back to confirm. But when I turned to the most recent page, my breath caught. His name was already written down. Room 6. His name was scribbled in shaky, uneven handwriting. The ink was still wet. A chill crawled up my spine. My head jerked toward the hall. Room six's door was closed. The lights in the hallway flickered. I grabbed my phone, my hands clammy. I debated calling the owner, but what would I even say? That a man checked in before he arrived? That his name was already written down? It sounded insane. I forced myself to breathe. Maybe I was just exhausted. Maybe I'd written something earlier and forgotten. Maybe nothing was wrong. I sat back down, keeping an eye on the hallway. Hours passed. The storm raged on. No sounds came from room 6, no movement. At around 3 a.m., the phone at the front desk rang. I jumped. My heart pounded as I stared at it. The line was internal. It was coming from inside the motel. I hesitated before picking up. Hello? Static. Then, a voice, soft, hoarse. Don't let him leave. A shiver ran through me. Who is this? Silence. Then, the line went dead. I shot up from my chair, my breath quick and uneven. My gaze flickered to the hallway. Room 6's door was open. Not just open, wide open, gaping like a wound in the darkness. I stepped out from behind the desk, my footsteps cautious. The room beyond was completely dark. I reached the doorway and flicked on the light. The bed was untouched. The floor was covered in a thin layer of snow, even though the window was shut tight. The air was freezing. But the worst part was the footprints. They led from the door to the closet. Something was inside. The motel was empty. No cars in the lot. No guests. I should have left. I should have run. But my shaking hand reached for the closet handle. I pulled it open. Empty. But the smell hit me immediately. Damp, rotting fabric. Old wood. Something else. Something sour. Then, the light flickered, and I saw him. Not standing in the closet. Not even inside the room, but behind me. Reflected in the mirror on the opposite wall. He was standing right behind me. His hood was down. His face, the lights cut out, and I felt cold fingers wrap around my throat. The snowstorm had swallowed the entire town, trapping us inside our homes, our businesses, our fears. I had never seen snow fall this thick, this fast. 1 minute, the streets were visible. The next, the world outside my window was a swirling white abyss. The wind screamed through the trees, shaking the glass of my tiny apartment above the diner where the power had flickered on and off all evening. But I wasn't worried. I had candles, blankets, and enough canned food to last a few days. Then, just as I was settling onto my couch, my phone vibrated. A text message from an unknown number. Let me in. A cold prickle ran down my spine. I stared at the screen, my breath slow, deliberate. Another message. I'm outside, I'm cold. I stood, heart pounding. The text had come through barely a second ago. But there was no way anyone could be outside in this storm, not without freezing to death. I hesitated, then crept toward the window, pulling the curtain aside just an inch. Nothing. Just the snow, thick and endless, the streetlights barely visible through the storm. No footprints, no movement. Then, my phone buzzed again. I see you. My stomach dropped. I backed away from the window, my pulse hammering against my ribs. The apartment felt too small, too quiet. I checked the locks. The front door was secure. The back entrance was bolted shut. The wind howled, pressing against the building. I tried to steady my breathing. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone had the wrong number. I forced myself to ignore it and curled up on the couch, wrapping a blanket around. Minutes passed, then an hour. The storm only grew worse, the walls groaning under the weight of the wind. The power cut out completely, plunging the apartment into deep darkness. The only light came from my phone screen. Then, footsteps, not outside, inside. I went rigid. The sound was faint but unmistakable. Slow, deliberate steps, creaking against the old wooden floorboard. They came from the hallway, leading toward my bedroom. I held my breath, straining to hear over the storm. The steps stopped. Silence. Then, my phone vibrated once more. I'm inside. My throat went dry. My shaking fingers hovered over the screen. I wanted to type something, ask who it was, beg them to leave, but I couldn't move. Then, the closet door in my bedroom creaked open. I didn't look. I didn't move. I heard it shift, something dragging against the floor, something stepping out. My phone buzzed again. Don't run! The lights flickered back on for a split second, long enough for me to see the reflection in the dark TV screen across from me. A tall, thin figure stood just behind me. I never heard it move. I never felt the air shift. I only saw its face, stretched too long, mouth curled into a grin that was all wrong, eyes too wide, too hollow. The lights went out again, and I felt breath against my ear. The blizzard had buried the town in silence, the roads impassable, the houses swallowed in thick layers of ice. I had been stranded in my family's remote cabin for 3 days, waiting for the storm to pass. It wasn't so bad. I had enough firewood, enough food, but I had no power, no phone service. Just the howling wind and the endless white void outside. On the 4th night, I woke to a sound, a slow, deliberate knock at the door. I sat up in bed, my breath fogging in the freezing air. No one should be out in this storm, not this far into the woods. Knock, knock, knock. My heart thudded. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't an animal. It was a person. I forced myself to move, creeping toward the front door, stepping carefully to avoid the creaky floorboards. Peering through the peephole, I saw nothing, just swirling snow, darkness. I hesitated. Maybe I had imagined it? The mind plays tricks when you're alone too long. Then another knock, this time slower, more forceful. I swallowed and pressed my ear against the door. A voice, low, cracked, barely audible over the wind. Let me in. The blood drained from my face. I didn't respond. I didn't move. Seconds passed, then minutes. The wind howled louder, shaking the walls. Then finally, footsteps, something crunching through the snow, moving away from the door. I exhaled, my body still rigid with fear. I waited. 10 minutes, 20, nothing. I moved away from the door, heart hammering, telling myself I had imagined the voice, that no one had been there, that I was just exhausted. I returned to bed. The fire had burned low, casting long, flickering shadows against the walls. I closed my eyes, then knock, knock, knock. I shot upright. My stomach twisted, but the sound, it wasn't coming from the front door anymore. It was coming from the window right next to my bed. I turned my head slowly, dread creeping up my spine. Through the frost-covered glass, I saw it. A face, pale, stretched thin, eyes too dark, too hollow, lips cracked open in a grin that was all wrong. It didn't blink. It didn't move. It just watched me. My breath caught in my throat. The firelight flickered, and for a brief moment, the face vanished into the darkness. Then, the whisper, I know you're awake. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just listened as the knocking started again. The snowstorm had trapped me in the old motel on the outskirts of town, a crumbling relic of the past that had long since stopped being anyone's first choice for lodging. But with the roads buried under 6 feet of snow and the wind screaming like a wounded animal, I had no other option. The motel clerk, a gaunt man with hollow eyes and a voice that barely rose above a whisper, had handed me the key to room 206 without a word. His fingers were ice cold when they brushed mine. The room smelled of dust and something faintly metallic like old blood. The walls were yellowed with age, and the carpet was damp beneath my boots. The bedspread was stiff, the kind of stiff that suggested it had been washed once, a very long time ago, and never again. I should have left. Even in the storm, I should have left. Instead, I locked the door and collapsed onto the bed, exhaustion from the long drive sinking into my bones. The wind rattled the window, ice creeping along the edges of the glass. Then, just as my eyes began to close, knock, knock, knock. My breath hitched. The sound came from the closet. I sat up, the air suddenly too thick, my pulse hammering against my ribs. I swallowed hard. Maybe I had imagined it. Maybe it was the pipes settling, the storm outside playing tricks on my ears. Then, another knock, slow, insistent. I stared at the closet door, the thin wooden slats barely holding back the darkness. And then, the door handle turned. The blood drained from my face. I scrambled back against the headboard, my breath shallow. The knob twisted left, then right, like someone was trying to open it from the inside. I reached for my phone, fingers shaking. No signal. The knob stopped moving. The silence was worse. I waited. Minutes passed. The wind howled. Then, just as I began convincing myself it had been my imagination, my phone screen lit. A text message from an unknown number. Don't open the closet. I dropped the phone. My heart nearly stopped. A moment later, another text. If you see its face, it will never let you go. My skin went cold. My stomach churned. I didn't want to turn my head. I didn't want to look. But something in the room shifted. The air thickened, pressing down on me. The closet door creaked, inching open just a sliver. And then, a breath, low, ragged, coming from inside the closet. My vision blurred. My body refused. Then, my phone buzzed one last time. It knows you're. The closet door swung open. The snowstorm had been raging for hours, turning the world outside my cabin into a white void. The roads were gone, the trees barely visible through the thick curtain of ice and wind. I had come here to be alone, to escape the noise of the city, but now the silence felt suffocating. It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway, just me, a few books, and the promise of peace, but something felt wrong. It started with the footprints. I had gone outside that morning to gather firewood, bundling myself in layers against the biting cold. The snow was untouched, except for a single trail of footprints leading from the woods to my front door. Just one set, and they never led back. I froze, my breath clouding in the icy air. The prints were deep, fresh. Someone had walked up to my cabin in the night and never left. I turned, scanning the tree line, my pulse quickening. Nothing moved, just the whisper of the wind through the branches, I followed the prints to the porch, my boots crunching over the frozen ground. The door was still locked. No signs of forced entry. But when I stepped inside, the air felt different, wrong, like someone had been here, like someone was still here. The fire had burned down to embers, casting long shadows along the wooden floor. My chair had been moved, only an inch, but I knew. I knew. I checked every room, my hands trembling, the bathroom, the kitchen, the small bedroom at the back, empty, and yet the feeling remained. A heaviness pressing down on my chest, like unseen eyes watching from the corners of the room. Then, that night, the knocking started. Soft, deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up in bed, my heart pounding. It was coming from the front door. I swallowed hard, moving slowly, my bare feet silent against the wooden floor. Knock, knock. I peered through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness. The storm. Then, just as I was about to step away, a face, pale, hollow, staring directly into the peephole. I staggered back, my breath catching in my throat. My hands fumbled for the lock. Silence. Then, my phone buzzed. A single text message. Let me in. I didn't reply. I didn't move. A minute passed, then another. Then, the bedroom door creaked open behind me. The text message buzzed again. I'm already inside. The blizzard had buried everything in white. The howling wind rattling my cabin like a dying thing. The power had gone out hours ago, leaving me alone with nothing but the flickering glow of the fireplace and the deep, suffocating silence. I had come out here to clear my head, to get away from the world for a while. But now, as the storm grew stronger, I wished for anything but isolation. Then I heard it. A voice, low, garbled, barely audible beneath the wailing wind. It came from outside. I froze, my grip tightening on the armrest of my chair. No one should be out there. The roads were impassable, the nearest town miles away. I strained my ears, listening, and then a knock at the door. Soft, careful. Like whoever was outside didn't want to wake me. I swallowed hard, forcing my legs to move. I approached the door slowly, my pulse hammering against my ribs. Knock, 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 3 times. I reached for the doorknob. Then I stopped. I didn't ask who it was. I didn't dare. Instead, I moved to the window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. There was no one there, just swirling snow, darkness. Then, the voice again, right outside the door, low, whispering, repeating my name. I stumbled back, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Then my phone vibrated. A single notification. Unknown number. Don't open the door. My hands shook as I stared at the screen. Knock, knock. I forced myself to look up, and then I saw it. The doorknob was turning, slowly, carefully. I grabbed the closest thing I could find, a fire poker, raising it like a weapon. The knob stopped. Silence. Then, my phone buzzed again. Unknown. Number. It knows you're alone. The air grew thick, heavy, like something else was in the room with me. I turned, and the closet door, it was open. The snowstorm had turned the world into a swirling void of white, erasing the road, the trees, everything beyond the weak glow of my cabin's lantern. I had been stranded here for 2 days, the power flickering in and out. My only source of warmth, the fire that struggled to stay alive. The isolation was suffocating. Then, at exactly midnight, the knocking started. Knock, knock, knock. 3 slow, deliberate raps at the door. I froze. My breath hitched in my throat. No one should be here. The storm had buried everything, and I hadn't seen another soul in days. I crept toward the door, my hands trembling as I peeked through the peephole. Nothing, just the storm, howling like a wounded animal. Then, another knock, louder this. I took a step back. My phone vibrated in my pocket, the sudden buzz making me flinch. I pulled it out. A single message from an unknown number. Don't let it in! My stomach lurched. My fingers tightened around the phone. Knock, knock. I backed away slowly. My heart slammed against. Then, the doorknob turned. I let out a strangled gasp, scrambling for something, anything to defend myself. The old hunting knife on the table. I grabbed it, my knuckles white as I held it in front of me. Then the knocking stopped. Silence. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. My phone buzzed again. It's inside. A cold wave of terror crawled up my spine. I turned, my eyes darting around the dimly lit cabin. Everything looked the same. The flickering fire, the empty chairs, the single window frosted over. Then I saw it. The closet door. It was open. It hadn't been before. A single footprint in the snow led from the inside, and a whisper right behind. The blizzard had sealed me inside my cabin, the wind howling like a wounded animal outside. I had enough firewood, enough food. I wasn't worried about the storm, until I saw the footprints. They were just outside my window. Deep impressions in the snow. Bare footprints, no shoes, no socks, just pale, naked prints leading up to my cabin. But there was no trail leading away. I shivered, stepping back from the window. Maybe I had just missed them before. Maybe the wind had already erased the other tracks. That's when the first knock came. Soft, faint, but deliberate. Knock, knock, knock. I turned toward the door, my stomach knotting. I wasn't expecting anyone. No one should have been able to reach me in this storm. I stood frozen, listening. Then, another knock. Knock, knock. I forced myself to the door, heart hammering. My fingers hovered over the lock. Then, at the last second, I stepped back and checked the peephole. Nothing. Just snow, swirling in the wind. Then, a breath, right against the door. Hot, slow, damp. I staggered back, swallowing the rising panic in my throat. The fire crackled behind me, the only sound inside the cabin. My phone sat on the table. I grabbed it, my fingers numb as I dialed. No signal. I turned back to the door. The knob was turning. I couldn't breathe. I raised my phone, desperate for something, anything, and snapped a photo through the peephole. Then the knob stopped. The air grew still. Silence settled in. I looked down at my phone. My pulse pounded in my ears as I opened the photo, and my blood ran cold. There was something in the picture, not a person, not an animal, just a shape, a tall, thin shadow pressed against the door, featureless, smudged, as if it wasn't supposed to be seen. I looked back at the peephole. Nothing. But when I turned around, the closet door was open. And the footprints? They led inside. The snowstorm had been relentless for hours, hammering against my cabin with a fury I had never seen before. The wind screamed through the trees, and the temperature had dropped so low that the windows had frosted over from the inside. I was alone, trapped by the blizzard, but I didn't mind, at least not at first. It started around midnight, a soft scraping sound against the front door. At first, I thought it was the wind. The storm had been throwing tree branches against the cabin all night. But then, the scraping came again, slow, deliberate, like fingernails dragging across the wood. I held my breath, every hair on my body standing on end. My cabin was miles away from the nearest town, and the roads were completely buried under snow. There was no way anyone could be outside. I crept toward the door, my bare feet silent against the wooden floor. The fire crackled behind me, casting long shadows across the room. I reached the peephole and looked. Nothing, just the swirling snow, the darkness pressing against the weak porch light. Then, a knock, software, rhythmic, knock, knock, knock. A chill that had nothing to do with the cold ran down my spine. I didn't move. Another knock, this time, harder. Then, my phone vibrated. I flinched, my breath catching in my throat. My hands trembled as I pulled it from my pocket. One new message, unknown number. Don't open it, no matter what you hear. I felt sick. My fingers hovered over the screen. My mind raced. Who sent this? How did they know? Then, the doorknob turned. My entire body went rigid. The metal rattled violently as if someone was desperate to get inside. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering against my rib. Another message. It knows you're alone. I let out a shaky breath, turning toward the window. The frost had thickened, but I could see something moving just beyond the glass. A shape, tall, unnatural, watching. Then, the whispering started, not outside, inside. I turned, every muscle locking in place. The closet door, it was open. I hadn't opened it. And inside, in the dark, something was breathing. The blizzard had been raging for hours, a thick wall of white swallowing the world beyond my cabin. The wind groaned against the wooden walls, rattling the windows like bony fingers tapping on glass. I was alone, miles from civilization, with nothing but the crackling fire and the howling storm for company. I had done this before, spent winters in isolation, but this storm felt different, like it wanted me. I had been dozing off on the couch when I heard it. A footstep, not outside, inside. I bolted upright, my pulse slamming against my rib. The fire had dimmed, casting the room in shifting shadows. I listened, holding my breath. Silence. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was the house settling. Then, another step. This time behind me. I turned slowly. The cabin was small, a single open room with a kitchen in the corner, a bathroom, and a closet near the door. I scanned every inch, my skin crawling. Nothing. I grabbed the fireplace poker, my grip slick with sweat. Something felt wrong. The air was too still, too heavy, like I was being watched. Then, a whisper, low, raspy, right by my ear. I spun, swinging the poker wildly, but there was nothing there. My phone buzzed on the coffee table. I nearly jumped out of my skin. I grabbed it, my fingers shaking. Unknown number. You left the door unlocked. I nearly dropped the phone. My gaze snapped to the front door. It was open, just slightly, barely an inch. My stomach twisted. I was sure I had locked it. Positive. I stepped toward it, heart hammering. The wind rushed in through the gap, carrying something with it. A footprint. Not mine. A single wet footprint leading from the door to the closet. My breath caught in my throat. The closet door. It was open. A sliver of blackness, deeper than the shadows around it. Then I saw them. Fingers, pale, curling around the edge of the doorframe, holding it open. The whispering returned, soft, curling into my ears like smoke. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. It's still watching. The fire flickered. The closet door creaked open, and the lights went out. The blizzard had turned my cabin into a prison, trapping me in a world of endless white. The wind screamed through the trees, rattling the windows like desperate hands trying to get in. I had always found the isolation peaceful before. Not this time. It started with the footprints. I had gone outside in the afternoon, bundled in layers, to bring in more firewood. That's when I saw them. A single set of footprints in the snow. They started at the edge of the trees and led directly to my front door. That wouldn't have been strange, except for one thing. There were no footprints leading away. A chill ran through me, colder than the storm itself. I stood frozen, my breath fogging in the icy air. Someone had walked up to my cabin, but they had never left. I turned sharply, scanning the woods. Snow swirled in thick curtains, making it impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. My heartbeat drummed against my ribs as I backed toward the cabin. The second I stepped inside, I locked the door. Deadbolt, chain, everything. For hours, I tried to shake the unease. Maybe the wind had erased the second set of footprints. Maybe I had miscounted. Then, as night fell, the knocking started. Software, faint. Knock, knock, knock. I stared at the door, my pulse hammering in my ears. It came again. Knock, knock. I crept forward, barely breathing, and looked through the peephole. Nothing, just the storm. Snow rushing past the dim glow of the porch light. Then, my phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. You left the back door open. My stomach dropped. I turned slowly, every nerve in my body screaming. My cabin only had one door. I never used the back entrance. Heart pounding, I moved toward the back room, toward the small storage door that led to the old root cellar. The door stood slightly ajar. A single wet footprint led inside. Then, the whispering started. Low, breathless, coming from the cellar. My phone vibrated again. It's inside now. The door creaked open another inch, and something moved in the darkness. The blizzard had swallowed the world outside my cabin, trapping me in a sea of white. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the windows and sending bursts of snow against the glass, like desperate fingers trying to claw their way in. I'd always loved the until tonight. Tonight, something was out there. It started just after midnight. I'd been sitting by the fire, sipping from a cup of coffee, when I noticed it, a shadow, just outside the window. At first, I thought it was a trick of the storm, the way the snow shifted and danced under the porch light. But then, it moved, deliberately, closer. I froze, my grip tightening around the cup. The shadow was tall, its shape distorted by the swirling snow. It didn't move like a person, it glided. Then, just as suddenly as it had appeared, it was gone. I tried to shake it off. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe I had imagined it. But then I heard it. A tap on the window. Software, rhythmic, tap, tap, tap. A cold dread seeped into my bones. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. Something was standing there, not outside, inside. The shape was tall, impossibly thin, its skin stretched tight over its bones. Hollow eyes bore into mine, its lips curled into a grotesque smile. My breath hitched. My body refused to move. Then, it whispered. My phone vibrated on the table. The sudden sound jolted me out of my paralysis, and I scrambled to grab it. A message, unknown number. Don't run. It likes when you run. A slow, crawling terror took hold of me. When I looked back at the window, it was empty. I wasn't alone anymore. Something was inside, watching, waiting. The blizzard raged outside, thick snow piling against my cabin like a slow-moving avalanche. The wind howled through the trees, an eerie, inhuman wail that never stopped. I'd been snowed in for 2 days now, but something about tonight felt different. The first sign came just after midnight, a soft scraping sound against the door. Not the wind, not a tree branch, something deliberate. I froze, gripping the armrest of my chair, my breath coming in shallow bursts. I waited, counting the seconds. Then, knocking. 3 slow, measured knocks. I swallowed hard, creeping toward the peephole. My cabin was deep in the woods, miles from anyone. No one should be here. I hesitated, then looked through the peephole. Nothing. Just the storm, thick and suffocating. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I nearly dropped it. Unknown number. Why did you look? My breath caught in my throat. My hands trembled as I read the message. Then, a whisper, right behind. I spun around so fast I nearly lost my footing. The cabin was empty, completely still, but something felt wrong. The air was heavier, thick with something I couldn't name. A pressure in the room, like someone was watching. Then, I noticed the closet door. It was open, just in. I knew for a fact I hadn't opened it. I grabbed the fireplace poker, gripping it so tight my knuckles went white. Something was in there, watching. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. Don't open it. My body locked up. A cold sweat broke across my skin. I could hear breathing now, low and rasping, coming from the darkness inside the closet. The fire flickered, the whispering returned. Then the lights went out. The blizzard outside was relentless, burying my cabin deeper under its icy weight. The wind howled through the trees, a guttural, unearthly wail that rattled the windows and seeped into my bones. I had lived alone in these woods for years, accustomed to the solitude, the stillness. But tonight, something was different. I had gone to bed early, lulled by the rhythmic crackling of the fireplace and the muffled hush of snowfall. Sleep came quickly, but some feeling of being watched, dragged me back to consciousness. I lay still in bed, listening. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, measured. Inside the cabin, my breath hitched. My bedroom door was closed. I had locked it before turning in. I was sure of it. I strained my ears, counting each step. 1, 2, 3. They stopped right outside my door. A shadow moved beneath the crack in the frame. Something was standing there. I couldn't move. My fingers clenched the sheets. The air in the room felt heavy, pressing down on my chest. Then the doorknob turned. A slow, deliberate twist. My stomach dropped. My body screamed at me to do something, but I was paralyzed by fear. I stared at the knob as it jiggled, gently at first, then more forcefully. Then a whisper, low, rasp, let me in. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, the vibration startling me so badly I almost gasped aloud. Heart pounding, I reached unknown number. Don't let it in. A shiver ran through me. I held my breath, staring at the message. What the hell was happening? The whispering continued, closer now. The door didn't open. The knob stopped turning. Silence. For what felt like an eternity, I sat frozen, gripping my phone, waiting. Then, the knocking started, but not at the door. It was coming from inside my closet. My blood ran cold. I turned my head slowly toward the closet door at the far end of the room. It was closed. No, not quite. It was open just an inch. My breathing came in sharp, shallow bursts. I swore I had shut that door. I swore I had locked it. The knocking continued. Soft, rhythmic, knock, knock, knock. Then, a whisper, even closer, right beside my ear. I launched myself out of bed, stumbling backward until my spine hit the wall. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might stop altogether. The closet door creaked open another inch. Darkness gaped from within. A space that should have been shallow, should have been empty, felt endless. A black void stretching far beyond the limits of the cabin. My phone vibrated again. Unknown number. It's already inside. My stomach twisted, my skin prickled. Then, the whispering changed. It became my voice. Low, breathless, mocking. Come see. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. I reached for the lamp on my nightstand with a trembling hand, fingers grazing the switch. The light flicked on, and something moved in the closet. A shape, too tall, too thin, bones pushing against sickly, translucent skin. Its head tilted at an unnatural angle. Its mouth stretched wide in a smile that revealed rows of too many teeth. And its eyes, they were mine. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Look away. I couldn't. The figure stepped forward. The room plunged into darkness, and then it laughed. The blizzard had swallowed the world outside my cabin. Snow smothered the trees, the wind shrieking like a wounded animal. The power had gone out hours ago, leaving only the dim flicker of the fireplace. I sat in my armchair, wrapped in a thick blanket, listening. At first, I thought it was my imagination. The storm played tricks on the mind, twisting sounds into whispers, shifting shadows into figures. But then, through the howling wind, I heard something else, knocking. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze. My cabin was no neighbors for miles. No one should be outside. I crept to them, careful not to step too loudly. The snow outside was undisturbed. No footprints. My breath clouded against the glass as I waited. Then, another knock, louder this time. I turned toward the door, heart hammering. The firelight flickered, casting long, twisting shadows against the walls. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Unknown number. Don't open it. I sucked in a sharp breath. My fingers hovered over the screen. Me. Who is this? No answer. Then, a voice, low, raspy, right outside the door. Let me in. A shiver in my spine. I stepped backward, my mind racing. Maybe someone was lost in the storm? But then, why would they text me? I forced my voice steady. Who's there? Silence. Then, a scratch. Fingernails dragging across the wall. My breath came in short, panicked bursts. I grabbed the fireplace poker, gripping it tight. Then, the doorknob twisted, slow, deliberate. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. It's already inside. A creak sounded behind me, inside the cabin. I spun around. The firelight cast shifting shapes across the walls, but nothing moved. Then, I noticed the closet door. It was open, just an inch. My stomach clenched. I had shut that door. I was sure of it. The whisper came again, not from outside, from inside the closet. Let me in. I stumbled backward, knocking over a chair. My pulse pounded in my ears. The fireplace flickered, then went out. Darkness swallowed the room, and in that pitch-black silence, I heard it move, breathing, slow, wet breaths, right beside me. My phone buzzed again. My shaking hands fumbled for it. Unknown number. Don't turn around. I couldn't breathe. I could feel it now, tall, towering over me. The air around me felt heavy, pressing against my skin. Then, cold fingers brushed my shoulder. I did what I shouldn't have. I turned around. The last thing I saw was my own face grinning back at me. Then the lights flickered on, and I was alone. But the closet door was wide open, and the whisper still lingered in the air. Let me in. The storm had locked me inside my cabin, a relentless blizzard burying the world beyond my windows. The wind howled through the trees, rattling the walls, as if something outside was desperate to get in. I had been alone here for weeks, my only connection to the outside world being my phone, though the signal was weak at best. That night, I was curled up by the fire, trying to ignore the unsettling feeling creeping over me, the kind of feeling that made the hairs on my arms stand up, though I had no reason to be afraid. Then, at exactly 3:17 a.m., the knocking began. Soft at 3 distinct taps against the front door. I stiffened. No one should be here. I lived in the middle of nowhere, miles from this town. The roads were buried under feet of snow. No one could have made it through this storm. My phone buzzed in my lap. Unknown number. Don't open the door. A lump formed in my throat. I stared at the message, my fingers trembling as I typed back. Me. Who is this? No answer. The knocking came again, louder this time. I crept toward the door, heart hammering, peering through the peephole. Nothing. Just darkness, swirling snow. I stood there, breathless, waiting. Then, the knocking moved. It came from the back door. I turned so fast I nearly fell. That wasn't possible. The footsteps in the snow should have led from one door to the other, but the ground outside was untouched. My phone vibrated again. Unknown. Number. Check the closet. The air in the room shifted. I wasn't alone. I turned slowly. The closet door was open just a crack. Had it been opened before? My skin prickled as I stepped forward. I reached out, fingers grazing the handle. Then a whisper, low, breathless. Don't! The voice came from inside the closet. I yanked my hand back. My breathing was erratic now. My body locked. Then my phone buzzed. Unknown number. It's watching you. I couldn't move. I didn't dare look away from the closet. Then a slow creak. The door opened an inch wider, and in the sliver of darkness, something moved. A long, pale hand with too many fingers reached out. I stumbled backwards, slamming into the wall. My phone slipped from my grasp, hitting the floor with a soft thud. The closet door creaked open wider, and then I saw it. It had my face, a twisted, stretched version of it. Its lips curled into a wide, unnatural grin, showing rows of jagged teeth. It took a step forward. My phone vibrated once more. Unknown number. RUN, but I couldn't. The thing lunged. The last thing I heard before the darkness swallowed me whole was my own voice laughing.
The blizzard had turned the world into an endless white void. Snow piled high against my cabin windows, the wind shrieking like a wounded animal. I'd been snowed in for days, isolated from the world with nothing but the flickering light of the fireplace to keep me company. That night, I woke to the sound of something tapping against the glass. I lay frozen in bed, straining to listen over the howling storm. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from the window beside my bed. My heart pounded. I lived alone. There were no trees near my cabin, no branches to knock against the glass, and the snow was so deep that no one, should have been able to stand outside my second-floor window. I turned my head slowly, my breath fogging in the freezing air. There was a face staring in at me, pale, thin, eyes too wide, mouth stretched into an unnatural grin. I sucked in a sharp breath and shot upright, but the moment I blinked, it was gone. I scrambled out of bed, heart hammering. The window was completely covered in frost, untouched. Had I imagined it? Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You saw me. I felt my stomach drop. My hands shook as I typed back. Me. Who is this? Unknown number. Let me in. I spun toward the bedroom door, pulse thundering. I could hear something now. Footsteps downstairs. Slow, deliberate. Someone was inside. I grabbed the fireplace poker from the corner and crept down the stairs, my breath shallow. The living room was empty, the fire flickering weakly. The front door was still locked. Then, a whisper, right behind me. Too late. I turned, swinging the poker, but nothing was there. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Look outside. Dread curled around my ribs. Against every instinct screaming at me, I stepped toward the window and pulled back the curtain. The storm had momentarily slowed. The snow outside was untouched, pristine, except for one thing: footprints, leading from my front door to the middle of the yard and stopping abruptly, as if whoever made them had simply vanished. Then, from the darkened reflection in the glass, I saw it. Standing right behind me, its face was still mine, but this time it wasn't smiling. The snowstorm had swallowed my cabin whole. The wind screamed through the trees like something alive, something hunting. I had been trapped inside for 3 days, alone, with nothing but the crackling fire and the occasional buzz of my dying phone to break the silence. Then around 2:43 a.m., I heard it, a knock, not at the door, at the window. I was on the second floor, my body locked up. The wind outside was strong enough to shake the walls. There was no way anything human could be out there. But as the seconds stretched, my skin prickled with something deeper than fear. The knock came again, software, insistent, closer. I swallowed hard and turned toward the window. The frost-covered glass reflected the glow of the fire, but beyond it, the world was pitch black. The snow had piled too high against the house for me to see much outside. Then, the breath, a slow, foggy exhale against the glass. Someone was standing there, watching me. I scrambled backward, my mind racing. How? How was that possible? I reached for my phone with trembling hands, a new message from an unknown number. "Don't move." My pulse stopped. Then, another knock. This time, from the hallway. I turned so fast my vision blurred. That wasn't possible. I was alone. I was alone. Then, footsteps, slow, uneven, moving toward my bedroom door. I grabbed the fireplace poker, my breath ragged, and stepped toward the door. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I knew there was nowhere to go, no way out. The footsteps stopped right outside my door. My phone buzzed. "It's in there with you." I felt it before I saw it. The air shifted. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to grow darker. And then, the whisper, right behind me. "I just wanted to come inside." I turned, poker raised, but there was nothing there. Just my own reflection staring back at me in the dark window, except it was still smiling.
The blizzard had buried the world in white, sealing me inside my remote cabin with walls that creaked under the weight of the storm. The power had flickered out hours ago, leaving only the dim glow of the fireplace to push back the thick, suffocating dark. Then, at 3:12 a.m., the knocking started. Software, steady, rhythmic. It came from the front door. I froze. The storm had buried my porch under at least 5 feet of snow. No one could be out there. Another knock, louder this time, more impatient. My phone buzzed on the table. I grabbed it, heart hammering. A new message from an unknown number. "Don't open it." My mouth went dry. I edged toward the door, poker clutched tight in one hand. Through the peephole, I expected to see nothing, just the swirling white void of the storm. But someone was a man, standing completely still, head tilted at an unnatural angle. His face was pale and stretched too thin, like his skin didn't quite fit. His eyes were black, no whites, no pupils, just pure, endless dark. I stumbled back. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. It's not a man. The knocking came again, but from the back door this time. Impossible. There were no footprints in the snow. No time for him to have moved. Then, the whispering started. Low, murmuring, coming from inside the cabin. I spun toward the fireplace, every hair on my body standing on end. The shadows moved. Something unfurled from the corner. Long, thin arms stretching toward me. My phone vibrated violently in my hand. "Don't look away!" I squeezed my eyes shut, breath ragged. The whisper surrounded me, voices overlapping, whispering my name over and over. Then, silent. When I opened my eyes, the fire had gone. The shadows had vanished, and the front door, it was wide open. Snow blew, but there were no footprints. No sign that anyone or anything had ever been there, except for one thing: a mirror, standing in the center of the room, and in its reflection, I wasn't alone.